Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. Her palm covered the keypad before I could ring again. Once is enough, she said, smile steady. The porch light snapped off as the door swung. I stepped in because I was already inside. And because backing out would start a war. I'm Mara, 27. I knew better than to argue at thresholds. My boyfriend squeezed my elbow once, quick. House rule, he murmured, eyes darting. He looked like someone who had rehearsed regret. A ceramic bowl waited by the entry bench. His sister tapped it twice, nails quick. Phone sleep here, she said, watching my pocket. I set mine on top, screen glowing. Her hand turned it face down, slow. The hallway swallowed sound like a trick. Voices from the dining room stopped at our footsteps. Chairs scraped, then silence settled again. His father stood with a towel across one shoulder. He folded it like a flag, then smiled. Welcome home, he said, arms open. No one moved to hug, which helped. I counted doors without thinking about doors. 3 on the left, 1 at the end. I felt watched from all 4 directions. We sat and the chairs closed the space. His mom slid a glass toward me, careful. House water, she said, tone light. It tasted fine, so I only pretended to sip. Her eyes tracked the level like a gauge. He bumped my knee under the table. Tomorrow is big, he whispered, breath tight. I kept my face calm because performance buys minutes. His father lifted a fork like a signal. Everyone lifted theirs in perfect rhythm. They asked about work, then friends, then passwords. The word landed like a dropped plate. Passwords keep loved ones safe, his mother offered. Her smile looked gentle and perfectly locked. I laughed once, soft to buy air. His sister leaned in, perfume faint, posture rigid. You trust him, she said, chin raised. Trust is access, not stories. She glanced at my phone by the bowl. My chest remembered the porch light going dark. I reached for the glass again, thinking. If I drank, I slowed and they gained ground. If I refused, I signaled open defiance. I let the rim touch my lip barely. Her shoulders eased and so did my heartbeat. He took my hand, thumb pressing the scar. A tell from years ago, not tonight. He always did that when afraid. I squeezed back once, message sent, message received. His father watched our hands like a ledger. After dinner there's a short welcome, the father said. 5 minutes, nothing heavy. The mom laughed under her breath, quick. Traditions comfort people, she added, eyes on me. My skin read that as a countdown. They toasted family, then to future plans. Glasses clinked without warmth, neat and careful. I lifted mine and clinked the air. The mother noted it with a blink. She straightened a placemat that wasn't crooked. A drawer opened near the sink, wood scraping. He walked over and slipped something inside. His shoulders narrowed like he expected thanks. The drawer shut with a quiet finality. My pocket felt suddenly lighter than truth. Bathroom is down the hall, the sister said. Her smile dared me to stand. I stood anyway because I hate dares. The hallway stretched like a test I'd studied. My phone remained in the bowl still. Halfway there I paused where the rug bunched. Voices surged behind me, then hushed again. The father coughed once, a measured warning. The air felt rehearsed like a scene. I kept walking because momentum was mine. The mirror over the sink caught my face. I looked like someone giving consent. I turned on the faucet and let it run. Water covered sounds and loosened them. I opened the cabinet for nothing useful. On the way back I brushed the wall. The paint had new patches near the thermostat. Fresh fixes mean recent incidents likely. My neck prickled with a thought I hated. Their pace had a script and I wasn't cast. I returned to the table and sat. My boyfriend's knee touched mine and stayed. The mother placed a small wrapped box near me. House gift, she said, tone almost kind. The ribbon looked like a seal, not decoration. I didn't open it, not yet. Her eyebrow climbed, then smoothed like iron. Open together, she said, hands folded. Everyone leaned in a fraction, silent. My pulse answered with a drumline. Inside lay a simple key on a tag. My name was engraved, letters clean. Belonging, the father said, voice even. He nodded toward the locked door in the hall. Your key works after vows. My thumb pressed the metal until it hurt. The key felt light and strangely heavy. He watched me for relief that didn't come. I slid it back into the box. The room cooled by 1 degree. Tomorrow morning, the mother said, almost whispering. Sunrise is pure. Her eyes held mine until I blinked. She smiled like a timer starting. I smiled back because I finally believed the clock. I cracked the hallway switch and let darkness win. Footsteps softened behind me as they cleared plates. I slid toward the vent cover near the baseboard. Cool air kissed my knuckles as voices leaked through. I held still because answers breathe when you do. Timing holds everything, the older man murmured through the grate. Younger ones rush and ruin the seal. A drawer clicked and metal touched metal. Sunrise or nothing, the woman answered, tone clipped. A chair leg scraped harder than it needed to. I want it clean, my boyfriend whispered, breath unsteady. No scenes, no chasing. Silence followed like a decision already made. I watched us float and counted heartbeats. Then the vent carried a word I hadn't earned yet. Binding. The sister laughed once and cut it short. Password gate first, location share second, then the oath. A glass set down with deliberate care. Someone asked if I already suspected anything. I eased the cover with 2 fingers and stopped. A nail pinged the metal and froze me. Chairs moved again as if rehearsing position. A lighter sparked and failed twice. The mother hummed until the flame caught. I stepped away and into the narrow office. The door barely opened and still groaned. A corkboard filled a wall with tidy rows. Faces smiled and printouts with initials in margins. Dates marched under them like checkpoints I should miss. I lifted the corner of one photo and blinked. The same box ribbon from tonight sat on another lap. Different woman, same engraving on the tag. The caption read after access with a neat underline. My ribs tightened around something stubborn and awake. A calendar hung beside the board with colored dots. Blue for introductions, red for compliance, green for merge. 3 Sundays in a row marked with XS. Next Sunday circled in pen with my initials. I took a picture and heard the hallway breathe. The knob twitched once as someone tested patience. I dropped behind the desk and flattened my hands. The door opened an inch and waited like a trap. A wrist showed through and adjusted the light. Shoes lingered on the threshold and then retreated. I slid out and checked the desk quickly. Notebooks stacked in a strict pile dared my reach. I lifted the top one just enough to see. A checklist stared back with 3 bullet points. Access isolation promise, no 4th line yet. I pressed the notebook closed and pocketed nothing. Taking trophies loses trials and invites searches. On the floor, a small metal charm glinted. Our initials had been etched on one side. The opposite read replace if broken with a code. Back in the hall, I slowed at the thermostat. Fresh paint framed it like a repair around a secret. I popped the plastic and met a camera eye. Its light flickered once like a blink. I put it back and let my breath out. The kitchen rose ahead with murmurs and clinks. He stood by the sink washing one plate slowly. His shoulders bunched when he saw me appear. You were gone too long, his jaw clenched on air. Walk with me, I said, already turning. We reached the mudroom where coats hid arguments. He followed, rubbing that thumb across my scar. Tell me the steps, I said, voice steady. He stared at the floor for a count of 5. Verification tonight, ceremony at dawn, then the lock. What lock? I kept my tone soft and even. Devices link, accounts mirror, location stays open, he answered. It stops fights, he added with a shaky shrug. He reached for my wrist and missed it. It looks worse than it is. Who signed before me? I asked, eyes narrowing. He flinched and glanced toward the dining room. Everyone eventually agrees, he muttered with a thin smile. No one leaves angry once it settles. The door behind us creaked like someone listening. The sister peered in and toyed with a ring. Mom wants dessert plated by pairs. Her gaze slid across his face and landed on me. Bring the guest, she added and lifted one eyebrow. I wiped my palms on my jeans and followed. The table returned to picture-perfect order instantly. 2 bowls waited with neat folded cards. My name sat on one like a dare. His mother lit a taper and tipped the first bowl. A small metal vial rolled into her palm. House tradition, she announced with a hostess glow. Tiny taste before tomorrow prevents nerves. She tapped the vial against porcelain with a click. He reached to steady it and met my stare. I nodded slowly as if agreeing to play. I lifted the spoon and tilted it near my mouth. Steam rose light and sweet and wrong. My tongue caught a back note I recognized. Not poison, something that fogs and slows. I let a drop fall back with a cough. Stronger than expected, I said with a wince. The father watched my throat like a referee. He didn't blink when the sister leaned closer. Finish it, she urged, voice almost kind. Her foot slid to block my chair's path. I set the spoon down and reached for water. The glass felt heavier than earlier and warmer. I tipped it toward my lips and spilled enough. My sleeve caught the splash and stuck. His other dabbed the table while tracking my eyes. He touched my shoulder and squeezed a code. 1 pulse 2 1, the old warning. His breath hitched in a way only I know. He wants me compliant now and plotting later. I wanted both and also a door. The father lifted a small remote and smiled. A chime answered from somewhere down the hall. Almost time, he announced without looking at me. He pocketed the device with a practiced twist. My pulse shifted into a faster gear. Keys please, the mother said with velvet patience. Overnight policy. Her palm opened over the ceramic bowl near the entry. My car fob wasn't there anymore. She watched me realize and lifted another spoon. I stood, chair scraped again like escorts. Bathroom, I said and kept my tone breezy. The sister checked her watch and swept an arm. 3 minutes, she replied and smiled too gently. I walked away with the room humming behind me. In the mirror, I saw a woman who wouldn't fold. I rolled my shoulders and swallowed fear down hard. The cabinet held nothing I could swing. But the window latch offered a different path. I slid it just enough to test give. Cool night air threaded through the gap and sharpened choices. My hands figured the angle without making noise. The latch stuck once and then yielded. The frame lifted high enough for a head. I paused because alarms sometimes sleep lightly. Footsteps approached again with the same heavy patience. I lowered the window and smoothed the towel. I flushed for the noise because noise covers. Water ran to draw ears toward plumbing. The handle turned and I unlocked the door. The mother stood there with 2 cups balanced. Nerves are normal, she murmured while studying my face. You'll thank us when the worry stops. She pressed a cup into my palm with care. I lifted it and let decision burn my tongue. I swallowed just enough to pass inspection quickly. Heat crawled down my throat and I counted backward. 30 seconds until fingers tingle and focus fuzzes. I smiled wide and held her gaze. Let's start, I said, and she didn't blink. I handed the empty cup back and flexed my fingers. They watched for wobble and found none. The older man lifted his remote like a baton. A soft click answered down the corridor. Doors unlocked somewhere I hadn't mapped yet. Ceremony room, the woman announced with hostess cheer. I followed because stalling bleeds leverage. My pulse counted tiles while my eyes worked angles. The sister drifted behind me, heel tapping. I pictured the vent, the board, the circle. We reached a narrow door with a coated latch. The older man covered it with his broad shoulder. He typed a sequence by muscle memory. The lock released with a proud chirp. My skin filed the sound for later use. Inside waited a table with 2 neat objects. A slim pad blinked with a waiting square. A pen lay beside it like bait. The woman gestured as if offering dessert. Just a print, she cooed, eyes steady. Left thumb, the sister added, chin angled. Then a short vow and a kiss. Her laugh sat wrong in the quiet. My boyfriend hovered near the frame, hunched. He avoided my face and rubbed his wrist. I stepped close and looked at the pad. A faint smear showed another print half cleaned. So this wasn't new and it worked. I angled my hand and tugged my sleeve. My nail skimmed my thumb and raised a bead. Careful, the woman warned as the blood welled. I smiled and pressed the cut to my tongue. Salt grounded me and sharpened the room. I reached toward the square and paused. Wipe first, I said, pointing at the smear. The older man nodded and handed a cloth. He wiped in one direction and not two. Residue streaked along the edge like a signature. He tossed the cloth into a bin. The pad glowed brighter and waited again. Thumb now, he gestured, patient and final. I leaned in and let my hair fall. My palm hovered as I exhaled slow. Then I pressed the bandage edge, not skin. The reader buzzed an error that sounded annoyed. Gloves then, the sister snapped, smile thinning. She produced a wipe from her sleeve. I took it and cleaned my hands calmly. The cut stung and gave me a countdown. 3 minutes before numbness, maybe 4. Try again, the woman urged, face soft. The older man reset the square with a tap. My boyfriend shifted and finally met my eyes. His pupils were wide and pleading and stubborn. I lifted my hand and said a choice. I pressed down flat and firm and wrong. Not the thumb, the heel of my palm. The pad chirped a mismatch and flashed amber. The older man sighed like a disappointed coach. Print the right finger or we postpone everything. Postpone, I said, tone light and easy. The woman's smile froze at the edges. The sister's ring clicked against her other ring. My boyfriend whispered my name without using it. The remote rose again like a gavel. A second door opened with a mechanical throat. Another table weight. D with 2 bracelets coiled. Each had a clasp that locked inward. Temporary link until morning, the woman offered gently. Comforting for everyone and entirely symbolic. I picked one up and weighed the hinge. It was heavy enough to matter in a struggle. The inner seam hit a small port. I turned it over and set it down. Symbolic things don't need ports, I said, smiling. The older man reached for my wrist with ceremony. I shifted back and found my boyfriend's chest. He steadied me with both hands. Please cooperate, he whispered into my hair. 15 minutes and it's done. Unlock my car first, I answered under breath. His jaw flexed and then released. He looked toward his mother for permission. She shook her head once, tiny and precise. He swallowed and tried a different plea. Let me wear it too, he offered quickly. Both of us linked and even. The older man considered and then nodded once. Fine, he said, both wrists for fairness. The sister rolled her eyes and fetched another clasp. They snapped the metal around his arm first. He flinched as it tightened toward his pulse. A light on the side blinked 3 times. He didn't look at me while it settled. I watched for a keyhole and saw none. Your turn, the woman said with calm focus. She lifted the second clasp and opened it wide. I angled my wrist, then fumbled and dropped it. It bounced and slid under the table. The sister huffed and crouched to retrieve it. I stepped toward the older man and offered distraction. What does the vow change? I asked, curious. Just clarity, he replied with a fatherly blink. People relax when roles are simple. His hand drifted toward the remote again. The sister rose with the bracelet and frowned. The hinge had jammed on a splinter. She worked it with a nail and muttered. I glided past and touched the remote lightly. A small button on its side clicked inward. The chime I'd heard earlier repeated faintly. Far off, another lock released by mistake. Everyone froze and looked toward the hall. The older man frowned at his device. I tucked the moment into my pocket. Later then, the woman sighed, mask resettling. Visitors tire and overthink, not helpful. She collected the bracelets and smoothed her skirt. Reset at dawn, breakfast first, she announced. Her voice carried a promise I refused to keep. We left the room and the door sealed. I counted the seconds until the second click. 2 locks on a single frame, not one. I memorized the rhythm for future panic. Panic obeys rhythm when you make it. Back in the dining room, new cups waited. Steam rose lightly and dared my lungs. I touched one and felt the warmth fade. Water only for me, I said brightly. The sister slid the cooler across with hard grace. Tonight you sleep here, the woman declared calmly. Guest room near the family wall. Her eyes checked my pockets without moving. My boyfriend rubbed his forearm where metal sat. He couldn't stop and I didn't ask him to. Show her, the older man ordered, bored and cert. My boyfriend led me toward the stairs. He walked too slow, like dragging time. Halfway up he stopped and lowered his voice. Window latch sticks in the guest room. I blinked once to show receipt, nothing more. He kept moving and didn't look back. We reached a door with a framed photo. The image captured a picnic with staged joy. I stared until my breath steadied again. Inside, a neatly made bed waited and watched. A small camera lens sat near the ceiling. Its red dot pulsed at a lazy pace. I faced it and stretched like I was tired. My arms mapped the hinge distance while I yawned. "Call me if you need water," he whispered. He lingered until his mother cleared her throat. Then he left and the lock settled. I stood very still and listened for steps. The hall quieted enough to trust guesses. I knelt by the window and felt the latch. It fought me with stubborn pride and grit. I eased it back with the edge of a coin. It gave a millimeter and then more. Outside air threaded in and cooled my scalp. I slipped my ring off and wedged the gap. The camera blinked faster like it sensed victory. I smiled at it and moved to the door. My ear found the groove and drank the hall. Soft music started somewhere to mask small noises. I slid under the bed and lifted the frame. A narrow zip tie held the slats together. I twisted until it snapped without sound. One slat came free like a lever. It was short, smooth, and hard enough. Back on my feet, I tucked it in my sleeve. The camera tracked the movement like a cat. I stretched again and covered the slip. I lay down and set breathing to calm. Every exhale rehearsed the next decision. I waited until the bracelet light clicked in the hall. His steps returned, softer and guilty. A note slid under the door with a rustle. 2 words in his handwriting stared up. "Back porch, midnight." Midnight hit while the camera blinked lazy in the corner. I rolled off the mattress and slid the slat into my sleeve. The latch lifted on the second try and breathed out. I tipped the frame and squeezed through the gap. Grasped at my knees and promised noise if I rushed. I kept low and counted stones between the boards. A sensor hummed near the gutter like a patient throat. I tossed my ring into the gravel and waited. A light flared on the opposite side of the yard. Wrong zone, safe path, I moved like a rumor. He stood under the porch with one palm raised. The bracelet on his arm pulsed in anxious rhythm. 3 minutes, he breathed into his sleeve. I nodded and showed the slat tucked near my wrist. His eyes flicked to the back fence and back. He pressed a folded tape into my palm. Numbers scrawled crooked across the strip. "Gate code," he whispered, shoulders tight. And 30 seconds before the ping repeats. The tape burned in my hand like a dare. "Where's my start?" I asked, voice flat. "Fob in the shed drawer," he answered quickly. They split the chip and shell to stall drivers. He pulled a tiny square from his pocket. "Transponder," he added, stare fixed on the door. I studied the square under the porch light's edge. It looked harmless and felt heavier than time. He tried to smile and failed halfway. "I kept this back when they inventoried," he said. He closed my fingers around it and swallowed hard. The keypad on the fence blinked like a small eye. I keyed the tape while he covered me with his body. Nothing moved, the pad beeped a dull denial. "Hold down and wait for the long tone," he hissed. I pressed and counted until my thumb ached. A soft whir rolled through the posts and stopped. Metal shifted a fraction like it stretched. We both froze at a groan inside the house. Footsteps wandered toward the kitchen and paused. We slid under the porch stairs and held breath. A shadow crossed the window and lingered there. His sister cracked ice from a tray and laughed. "Check her at past," she told her phone. Camera motion doubled upstairs. She let the window drop and the glass rattled. He squeezed my arm twice and pointed left. "Beamline starts at that paint seam," he mouthed. "Crawl under or it chirps the panel." I laid flat and tested the space with my forearm. Cool dirt salted my sleeves and steadied my head. We belly slid along the board until my ribs burned. I pulled my shoes off and tied them to my belt. He guided me with 2 fingers on my ankle. We cleared the seam and crouched in time with a click. The porch light sighed and shut itself down. "Listen," I said because there was more buzzing. "Router room near the office," he answered quickly. "Recorders feed to a drive under the stairs." "Can you cut it?" I asked without hope. "Not without the key to the panel," he grimaced. We reached the fence corner and tried the code again. This time the latch shivered and slipped a finger. A chain hugged the post tighter than habit. He searched his pockets and came up empty. I pulled the slat and wedged it into the loop. The chain bit the wood and refused to budge. I torqued my wrist until my shoulder barked. Metal gave a quarter inch and then more. He braced the post with his heel and leaned. The link popped and snapped back with a gasp. The alarm chirped inside like a metal bird. We both froze and counted the seconds. Exit delay, he muttered through his teeth. It only escalates if we stop moving. Then move, I shot back and grabbed the gate. It opened enough for a body angled sideways. He gestured for me to go first. I squeezed through and lost a shoe to the gap. I didn't stop for it because stopping costs time. He passed the transponder through and touched my wrist. A porch light kicked on across the yard next door. He glanced at it and shook his head. Neighbors trained to ignore when this glows, he said. He lifted the bracelet to show the pulsing dot. They think it's rehab or some wellness stunt. We hugged the hedge and hustled toward the driveway. He kept pace behind me and watched the house. The kitchen window brightened and then dimmed twice. Once for disarm, twice for motion. He flinched like someone had slapped H. I am awake. Tell me the last step, I demanded under my breath. Ceremony streams to relatives at dawn, he answered. They archive consent and share logs weekly. So today was prep, I said and tasted metal. He nodded and wouldn't lift his eyes. We reached the shed door and he palmed it open. Tools lined the wall in careful rows. He went to the second drawer and lifted a tray. My fob shell sat there stripped and useless. He pointed lower and tapped a false bottom. I popped the panel with the slat edge and grinned. The rest of the fob stared up like a caught fish. I fit the chip into the shell until it clicked. The panic siren hiccuped inside the kitchen and paused. He winced and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. A voice boomed from a speaker above the back door. Return to the family room within 1 minute. The mother's cadence carried sugar over iron. Guests may request guidance at the cabinet. The speakers repeated the line and cut out. He grabbed my elbow and steered me toward the cars. Tilt your head down if cameras sweep, he warned. Face recognition pulls notifications faster. I tucked my chin and counted steps to the curb. The street view opened like a breathing chest. My car sat under the tree and faced freedom. I pressed the fob and the mirrors unfolded. He looked at the house and then at me. Go, he said, voice shredded and raw. I'll stall them and break the loop. Come with me, I pressed hand on his sleeve. He shook his head and kissed the air near my ear. If I vanish now, they start calling affiliates. They track you by my access level, he added. Give me 2 hours to cut my profile. Inside the kitchen, a silhouette filled the frame. The mother lifted something to her mouth and spoke. Back porch now. Her words carried into the yard and found us. He closed my fingers over the keys and pushed. I slid into the seat and locked the doors. He planted himself between me and the house. The gate creaked open behind him with anger. 2 figures stepped out and scanned the yard. He lifted both hands and stalled them with questions. I started the engine and the system woke. Warnings scrolled across the dash like a script. Tracking disabled, service overdue, signal blocked. He turned his head just enough to check me. Left at the corner, he mouthed, and then louder, wait. The mother's gaze found the car and didn't blink. She pressed something on a pendant near her collar. My phone in their bowl would now light and scream. Every shared device in the house would ping my name. I inhaled once and broke every rule I'd made. Tires rolled over the curb as the alarm wailed. He stepped sideways and pulled their attention off me. The father moved to follow, and the sister raised a hand. The porch speaker barked a countdown to lockdown. I punched the gas and shot toward the corner. In the mirror, I caught his outline for a beat. He lifted his wrist and snapped the bracelet band. Metal flashed as it cracked against the post. Sparks popped and the porch camera stuttered. He mouthed one word through the chaos, run. I turned left hard and took the mirror with me. Tires skidded, then gripped, then begged for mercy. A horn blasted as I cut in front. I threaded the gap and watched the alley yawning. Something behind me flashed once like a promise. I killed my lights and slid into the cut. A dog barked and then choked on silence. My chest pounded a code I followed anyway. Count to three, breathe, count to three. A second engine prowled past without slowing down. I waited until the street swallowed its growl. The bracelet spark at the porch replayed inside me. I needed distance before their network tightened again. I needed signal before they seeded lies. I eased out and listened for drone whine. A status line blinked across the dash like a dare. Service blocked by security profile, manual pairing required. The transponder felt hot against my thigh. I pressed it to the console and waited. The screen coughed, then offered a temporary unlock. Route me offline, I whispered like it helped. The map threw up a grid with no names. Fine, landmarks and angles beat breadcrumbs tonight. 2 turns to the river road, then north. Water meant fewer ground cuts but possible eyes. Headlights spilled over my hood from the right. Not theirs, a rideshare with a distracted driver. He stared at his passenger and almost saw me. I held still until their laughter faded. My hand stopped shaking for 6 breaths. A notification tried to climb past the block. Unknown device requests access to contacts and camera. Their reach stretched farther than his porch walls. I denied and then denied again. The screen sulked but stayed on my side. I recorded a voice note with my throat tight. Editing stops now if you hear this. I named the family, the address, the attempt. I added the time and the code on tape. I saved it 3 times and still didn't trust it. I led into a car wash bay with the system alive. Water guns slept in their holsters like bored guards. I parked center and left the engine running. The exhaust fog drifted and bought me cover. I pulled the fuse box lid and held my breath. I counted rows with a fingertip because speed matters. Tracker auxiliary, camera handshake, remote unlock feed. I yanked 2, then 3, then the 4th. The dash went feral and then leveled out. The map died and left me deliciously alone. Something buzzed near the windshield like a hornet. A quadcopter dropped into my slice of sky. It hovered with lazy confidence over my hood. A red diode winked and put my pulse on trial. I slid lower and reached for the washer spray. Water blasted upward and snarled its rotors midair. It wobbled and then clawed for balance. I hit it again and walked it backward. It smacked the bay roof and tumbled out. Props snapped like teeth against the concrete. I drove over the wreck and kept moving. Metal protested and then fell behind me. I took back roads that only delivery drivers loved. Kids stood on a corner and filmed everything. One pointed at my bumper and shouted something. At the next turn, I saw the first camera pole. A municipal eye with a hungry posture. I ducked my face and lifted my collar. The system still recognized shapes as targets. I chose the tunnel instead and prayed for drag. I cut ignition at the slope and coasted. Darkness swallowed me and gifted perfect silence. Halfway through, I heard a siren start distant. Not police, wrong cadence for city response. Family network then scaled to scare and heard. I popped the glove latch and checked the manual. I tore a page and rolled it tight. I stuck it between the brake light switch. No brake glow while I crawled the center. The tunnel spit me out like a shot. I drifted into a scrap yard featuring stacks and shadows. A forklift dozed with its teeth raised high. A man in a hoodie stared at my tires. He lifted 2 fingers and didn't smile. I didn't see you, he muttered, stepping aside. I flashed a palm full of air as thanks. No plates, no questions, just alignment in crisis. He pointed to a bigger pile and vanished. I drove behind the mountain of twisted frames. My heart tried to climb out of my chest. A text bloomed on the console like a wound. Stay where you are and breathe. Not them, him, his way of swallowing panic. Another message stacked second after. Cut your cards, ghost your apps, call no one. Where? I answered with my thumb clumsy. He pinged a place only we knew from a fight. A quiet lot behind a shuttered store. He hadn't used it since we made up. Which meant he burned a memory for me. I left the yard and fed the car easy. 2 blocks, then 4, then 8 in a glide. Blinkers stayed off because patterns breed nets. I passed a cruiser rolling slow without hunger. A different hunt tonight, 1 level up. The lot was empty except for a vending machine. Its face reflected me and looked unimpressed. I parked behind the dumpster and checked the street. He wasn't there, but the clock was moving. The night pressed in and asked for decisions. I walked to the machine and punched random numbers. Nothing fell because of course nothing fell. I flattened my palm against the plexi once. It echoed stupidly and kept my voice habit. I turned back and saw a shadow cross. He stepped from the alley with his arms wide. No bracelet, no remote, no family script. He looked thinner and wired and alive. Phones, he whispered, holding out a bag. Kill them both and we earn a minute. I dropped his burner and my smartwatch into the sack. He added a small black box with a smirk. Repeater they installed in the hall display. He zipped the bag and tucked it under trash. Now we talk like humans without chaperones. Do they know you're out? I asked, voice careful. They think I'm in the office fixing records. And they think you took the bait route. He dragged his hands through his hair and shook. They'll spin the alarm into concern by sunrise. That ceremony, I started and watched his face. Stream scheduled and auto starts without us. He pulled a key from his sock and showed it. Panel access for the storage under the stairs. Drive sits there, I can wipe it tonight. Not safe to go back, I pushed hard. Not smart either, he answered with equal force. Still necessary, his eyes held and didn't flinch. They carry other people's records on that drive. It's the spine of the thing, not a trophy. He handed me a folded card with raw edges. A string of letters and numbers covered one side. A throwaway inbox goes live on top of the hour. Upload the board photos and your audio there. If I vanish, send it to our 3 loudest friends. You trust them? I asked and scanned the street. I trust loud more than polite today. He smiled without humor and checked the corner. They'll blow whistles for sport if. Asked right. And that buys you daylight if I stall. A car rolled by with tinted windows and bass. He turned his face and pretended to cough. The driver glanced once and kept moving. We both exhaled when the taillights reached the corner. Breathing felt like a luxury item with tax. He opened the trunk of an abandoned sedan. Blank plates, busted locks, enough space to hide. Lie down if anything rolls in hot. He handed me a folded hoodie and a flashlight. You bolt if I cough twice, he added flatly. No hero turns, I warned and tightened my grip. He nodded and swept his gaze over rooftops. They use drones when bored and cars when angry. Tonight they're both. He laughed without sound and looked older. We mapped the block with hand signs like thieves. 2 entrances, 1 blind spot behind the stairs. He would break toward the office from the alley. I would circle wide and trigger the porch cam. They would chase a ghost while he carved the heart. 15 minutes, he whispered, palm against mine. Then we vanished toward the highway ramp. He squeezed once and stared hard at my eyes. If I miss the mark, don't circle back. I mean it, he swallowed the rest and turned. I jogged east and kept to shrubs and parked vans. Every step counted and none could echo. The house rose 3 blocks out like a dare. One window glowed with tired persistence already. Someone paced and talked to a polished wall. I texted a single word into the alias inbox. Proved. It auto-replied with a link and a countdown. Upload open for 8 minutes and no more. I felt the net of the night tighten again. I vaulted a low fence and scraped my wrist open. Blood ran warm and woke my senses fast. I pressed my sleeve to slow it to stubborn. I reached the backyard hedge and crouched. The porch camera blinked with that lazy rhythm. I pulled the slat from my sleeve and readied. The memory of the chain pressure guided my angle. I poked the lens with a quick, steady twist. It tilted enough to gaze at the grass. The porch whispered movement and then held its breath. From the alley, a car door clicked soft. He was inside by now or very close. I needed their heads turning my way. I stepped into the porch cone and tossed a pebble. It clattered like a confession and did the job. The sister stormed out with a flashlight buzzing. She swept the beam across railings and gate. Show yourself, she snapped toward the hedge. I let my shadow break across the steps. She lunged and the light bounced high. I ran along the fence line with measured noise. Enough to bait, not enough to die. A silhouette filled the kitchen doorway and froze. The older man pointed and others pivoted. Boots hit boards and started counting me. I cut behind the tool shed and dropped flat. Their chase carried past me toward the alley. 2 broke left and 1 swung wide right. The mother barked instructions that tasted like orders. Her voice moved the family like a practice lever. My phone wasn't in my pocket and good. They would expect an error and track nothing. I lifted the window to the powder room an inch. Enough for a hand and then a shoulder. I slid in and landed on careful tiles. The house smelled like bleach and staged comfort. I resisted memory and focused on locks. 3 clicks echoed down the hall like a metronome. He had the panel or the hallway records already. I cracked the door and listened for the argument. The sister cursed and my chest smiled. She had lost my trail and hated it. I moved along the wall and counted outlets. The office door waited with its proud latch. I pressed my ear and heard keys tapping. He worked the terminal with surgical patience, precise. I folded into the guest room entry and watched the hall. The camera dot pulsed faster like it tasted heat. Downstairs, the older man reset a toggle and swore. Power dipped and lights stuttered around the edges. I slipped into the office while the house blinked. He was on the floor with the panel open. The drive enclosure sat exposed like a throat. He held the master key and looked triumphant. 3 more minutes and we're ghosts. Faster, I mouthed and scanned the corridor. The mother's step pattern approached with fury contained. The sister loaded something into a pocket with a snap. The office clock swept toward the quarter mark. My ribs sang a warning and would not stop. He pulled the drive, slid it into a sleeve. He attached a burner and ran the kill script. Numbers sprinted across a tiny screen and vanished. He wiped again and again for good measure. The last line flickered and turned to zeros. A shadow filled the doorway without sound. The mother stood there with a stun wand ready. Her eyes were bright and almost happy. Enough games, she whispered, stepping inside. The sister flanked her with a zip tie looped. I grabbed a bookshelf anchor and yanked hard. The metal bracket screamed and came free. I swung low and KN. Ocked the wand sideways. It spat against the rug and died smoking. The sister lunged and I met her wrist. We grappled in a narrow mess of papers. She hissed when I twisted her finger back. Let go, she grunted and went for my throat. I drove my shoulder into her ribs and shoved. She hit the desk and cracked the keyboard tray. He slid between us and blocked the mother. Stop this, he begged with both hands up. Look at yourselves, he tried before breath failed. The mother reached for his ear like childhood. He flinched and stepped away from her gravity. I kicked the wand under the file cabinet hard. The sister pounced and found only carpet. The mother reached for the door to trap us. I hurled the bracket and smashed the light switch. Darkness punched the room and stole their rhythm. He grabbed my elbow and we dove low. We crawled beneath the desk and out the side. My knee scraped wood and that helped me move. We cut left while they searched with hands. The hallway opened and the house shouted alarm. We sprinted for the back stairs with everything screaming. The father rose from the basement like a wall. He held a brace bar and scanned our faces. He didn't swing because shock bought me seconds. I slammed the door in his teeth and locked it. We bolted into the mudroom and hit the porch. Drones revved alive like a nest woken. He tossed the drive into the yard compost. The mother burst after us with pure focus. Her pendant blinked and called someone with status. Car, he panted, pointing toward the curb. I veered instead toward the neighbor's pickup. Country keys live under visors with religious faith. I checked once and felt plastic under my fingers. The engine answered with a coarse, eager growl. Get in, I barked, hauling him by the sleeve. He stumbled and then recovered with a curse. The sister cleared the steps with a leap and missed. She rolled and sprang up with animal intent. The father pounded the siding and yelled commands. I hit the road and slalomed around a trash bin. Drones chased and filmed and tried to blind us. He opened the glove and found an old flare. He cracked it and tossed it backward like a comet. 2 drones misjudged and kissed the heat, then fell. We took the river road and dared the dark. The pickup rattled and begged for smoother asphalt. He checked the rear and breathed like a boxer. Drive another mile and then kill lights, he urged. They follow patterns until patterns break on purpose. I did as ordered and coasted into a service lane. We cut the engine and listened for pursuit noise. Wind carried nothing useful and nothing dangerous. He hunched forward and pressed fists to his forehead. "Drive us dead," he muttered, "but they'll still spin." "We leak first then vanish," I answered quickly. He nodded and handed me the folded card again. "Upload everything right now," he insisted, voice shredded. "Use the parking lot Wi-Fi near the basketball court." They never blocked that because optics matter. I pulled a U-turn and aimed for the rec center. Empty courts glowed behind chain gates like cages. My hotspot refused, but the guest network welcomed. I dumped photos, audio, and names into the inbox. A progress bar crawled across my screen like a snake. Headlights appeared on the far side of the lot. Not cops, too tidy, too perfectly slow. He leaned out the window and watched the approach. 3 of them, he whispered, counting shapes. "Window or bumper?" I asked with a thin grin. "Bumper first," he answered and braced his feet. I slammed into reverse and clipped a concrete stop. The truck jolted and the tailgate shrieked. The other car accelerated and then hesitated. Upload hit 90% and time ran out. I floored it toward the exit nearest the road. A 4th car blocked the lane with its nose out. I cut sharp through the grass and chewed mud. The truck fishtailed and then found purchase. We burst onto the avenue and swallowed distance. 1 car followed and 2 hung back, cautious. They wanted me corralled, not crushed. He rolled down the window and waved them on. He laughed once like a man losing decorum. "Smile for the stream," he yelled into the night. I cut right and right again to break pattern. The follower overshot and fought to pivot. I dove into a delivery zone and threaded pallets. He leaned out and knocked the side mirror flat. We shaved inches without a single apology. The upload pinged completed and my spine unlocked. A second ping announced the auto forward worked. 3 new emails left my drafts with attachments. He watched the confirmation and wiped his eyes. Now they have to choose between retrieval and reputation. We rolled into a dark cul-de-sac and coasted. I parked beneath a crooked tree and killed the truck. He looked at my scraped wrist and winced. "Wrap that before your grip goes soft." He tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it. Sirens wailed somewhere behind the warehouses. Multiple directions at once and layered and messy. The family had escalated or the city noticed. Either way, we'd sparked something that couldn't shrink. He adjusted the bandage and studied my face. "You still with me?" he asked, voice low. "Until this stops eating people," I replied sharp. He smiled like he didn't deserve the answer. "Then brace for tomorrow," he warned softly. "They always visit first before they explain." I checked the rearview and track. At the empty street. My phone, my watch, my old life, all humming elsewhere. I pictured the board with all those smiling prints. I pictured the blank spaces waiting for more. We weren't special, we were just early to refuse. He opened the door and leaned into the quiet. "We ditch the truck and take the train," he said. "Tickets cash only and phones still dead." I nodded and tucked the transponder deep. He closed the door and placed his palm on the glass. "We stay loud until morning," he added like a plan. "Then we walk into a place with cameras." He traced a small circle where my hand rested. "We tell the story before they varnish it." He let go and the window fogged and cleared. I started the engine and tasted metal again. The night waited with both hands open. We pulled out and left the cul-de-sac behind. A single drone blinked high and lazy above us. I rolled my neck and set my teeth for the last stretch. I ditched the truck and sprinted for the station doors. He kept pace, head low, shoulders squared. Cameras watched the entrance with bored patience. I lifted my chin and dared them to blink. Public eyes meant witnesses and witnesses meant friction. The board above the turnstiles flipped to morning schedules. I bought 2 paper tickets with shaking cash. He pressed his knuckles to the glass and scanned exits. "Clock's thin," he muttered, breath tight. "We ride 1 stop then disappear." A uniform drifted near with polite curiosity. I nodded like a commuter late for work. He angled his body to hide my scraped wrist. I held a smile just long enough. The uniform drifted away and radioed nothing. We reached the platform and hugged a pillar. A family argued near the benches about seats. Their noise gave us shelter for a moment. My phone-free pocket felt like a missing tooth. He tapped my elbow twice and pointed north. A train rolled in with a grinding sigh. Doors opened, people poured, eyes everywhere. We stepped on and took the hinge spot. I set my shoulders and met the nearest lens. Record me, I thought, keep me in daylight. The car rattled through the first tunnel stretch. He braced his feet and kept scanning windows. 3 stops flashed on the overhead in quick bursts. We needed 1, not 3, before pursuit caught up. The doors closed and the car lurched. My inbox burner chimed inside my head. I pictured new forwards hitting our loud friends. I pictured comments forming under the attachments. He caught my expression and gave the smallest nod. We had thrown sparks into dry grass. At the next stop, 2 men boarded and split. Matching jackets, earpieces, blank stares. They posted near each end like anchors. Not police, too synchronized and too clean. He shifted his weight and flexed his fingers. Couple seats, one of them announced pleasantly. People scooted because people obey confident voices. He pretended to check a map and smiled. The train doors hissed and locked us all together. The pillar between us and them felt thin. I nudged toward the gangway and pushed through. The coupling yawned and the floor rattled. He followed and slid the door behind us. We straddled the plates and rode the sway. 2 more cars, then switch back, he mouthed. We slipped into the next carriage like smoke. A kid stared at my bleeding wrist and frowned. I put a finger to my lips and winked once. He grinned and returned to his game. Bless the selfish focus of morning zombies. The earpieces kept pace 1 car behind. They didn't rush, which scared me worse. They waited for the right angle and quiet. We needed chaos to slow precision. I pulled the emergency handle cover down halfway. The intercom chirped about fines and penalties. Passengers glanced up, then back down to screens. I held the cover and counted to 3. Then I let it snap and raised my voice. Someone fainted near the last door. Movement surged and tripled in an instant. Strangers crowded the aisle with good intentions. 1 man waved a water bottle like a trophy. The earpieces stalled and recalculated their approach. He grabbed my wrist and cut left. We spilled into the vestibule and braced. Doors opened to the next platform with a hiss. Change trains, he whispered as we leapt out. The earpieces hit the threshold a heartbeat late. The crowd swallowed them and swallowed us. We ran up the stairs 2 at a time. My legs burned and my lungs complained. I used the pain to keep pace. He took my hand at the landing and pulled. A buzz rose behind us like angry bees. Street level burst with traffic and morning urgency. He steered me toward the courthouse plaza. News vans idled near the steps with cables coiled. I didn't ask why they waited here. The answer made itself obvious as we crossed. A protest pressed against the barriers with signs. Nothing to do with me and everything anyway. Cameras pointed in every direction at once. Perfect cover and perfect risk in the same frame. He lifted at his chin and walked straight through. Audio, he said, raising his empty hands. On record, I added loud and steady. Several microphones tilted our way on reflex. Faces turned, curious and hungry and restless. 2 men in earpieces slowed at the edge. We were targeted for a binding this morning. I kept my sentences short and sharp. They store compliance proofs and share logs. Names and dates already distributed. The drive is ash and the stream is killed. Reporters glanced at each other and found greed. The nearest one motioned for a go live feed. The camera red light winked with real interest. He stepped closer and peeled back his sleeve. A bracelet bruise ringed his arm like evidence. Families can be cartels wearing oven mitts, he said. Call it wellness and no one blinks. Call it tradition and people applaud. Call it consent and expect signatures under duress. He lifted his wrist and let the crowd gasp. The earpieces hovered behind a line of sheriffs. They couldn't cross the staging without reason. The sheriffs watched us and watched them. Standing between wolves and a fire earns tips. The balance held 1 beat and then cracked. A phone near the stage buzzed angry and loud. A staffer looked down and went pale. He whispered into another staffer's ear quickly. The second nodded and lifted a hand. Microphones quieted as the sheriff stepped forward. Both of you stay where you are. His tone promised protocols and paperwork. People booed because people love underdogs. I raised my hands and didn't move. My voice didn't shake when I answered. We will give statements on camera right now. Then we will walk into your building. But we won't leave with anyone in plain clothes. He echoed me, eyes on the earpieces. The sheriff's jaw worked like a grinder. Across the plaza, 3 familiar figures appeared. Mother, father, sister, perfectly composed and furious. They threaded through the watchers with ice patience. The mother carried a folder held like a relic. She smiled at the cameras as if born to it. Misunderstanding, she began with syrup and polish. Our son suffers impulsive episodes affecting judgment. His partner is sadly suggestible when frightened. She imagined criminality where none exists. The folder opened to a sheaf of staged notes. I laughed once and let it ring out. Check the media inboxes right now. Check the timestamps and the signatures. Check the multiple women pictured with after-access captions. Several phones lit and caught fire with interest. A reporter shouted that the files matched. Another announced dates and initials aloud. The crowd shifted into a better mood. The sheriff glanced at a deputy and nodded. A few barriers moved without anyone admitting it. The father tried subtle intimidation with a lean. He framed his body to block my view. The sister mouthed something vile without sound. He stood between us and breath slow. The mother kept smiling because it was habit. Come home, she coaxed, eyes on her son. We forgive trespasses when family behaves. Say you were coerced and this dissolves. Her fingers fluttered like a stage trick. I took one step closer and erased the gap. Speak to your audience, I told him quietly. Speak to me and let them listen. His throat bobbed and then steadied. I wrote the protocols in the first place. Then I watched them devour everyone I love. A collective gasp rolled across the plaza. His shoulders dropped and he didn't hide. I archived everything out of guilt and fear. I thought I could fix it from inside. I was wrong and I'm done. The mother's face tightened just for a second. Then the mask returned and rotated to the crowd. We'll address this legally, she bristled with velvet. Kindly remove this spectacle from public safety space. She raised her pendant and pressed it twice. The earpieces moved right then and fast. 2 flanked the sheriffs and whispered procedure. A third tried to cut behind the cameras. I stepped into that path with both feet. He mirrored me and braced for impact. A hand reached between and showed a badge. Real badge, not a borrowed costume. Everyone stays exactly where they are. The plaza exhaled like a tired athlete. The badge turned to the cameras and nodded. Complaint received 15 minutes ago, the agent announced. Evidence verified across several sources. Temporary protective measure in effect here. He pointed to the family without looking away. We will escort you to an interview room. The mother started to protest and then swallowed it. The father stared at his son and recalculated hate. The sister smirked like a gambler down 50. The agent raised a hand and waited. Or you can leave in cuffs, he added. They complied because optics finally hurt worse. The earpieces backed off with practiced grace. The sheriffs moved into a looser guard. People started clapping like a me ended. I didn't join because the game wasn't done. Inside the courthouse, air cooled every nerve. A clerk guided us to a small room. A camera faced 2 chairs and a table. He sat, I stood, the agent watched. Burn it clean, I told the red light. We walked through the timeline without fluff. We named tools and tricks and triggers. We flagged allies who could confirm patterns. We listed women in photos for outreach. Every sentence built a step toward daylight. The agent paused and rubbed his chin. You both aware this gets ugly? I prefer ugly to invisible, I answered. He nodded once and signed something quick. Someone will scream tonight, not you. We left through a side door into noise. Protesters swelled and mixed with morning commuters. An anchor threw to a live segment nearby. Our faces flashed on a portable screen. He flinched and then stood straighter. Now the hard part, he murmured under breath. Staying safe after the show. We go where numbers favor us. Hotel with 20 cameras and nosy staff. Then we pick a lawyer with a bullhorn. We cross the plaza with new gravity. Phones pinged all around like tiny storms. A girl ran up and pressed a note. Thank you, she wrote, eyes wet and angry. There are more of us, she whispered. We reached the curb and waited for a cab. I watched the courthouse doors for movement. The mother emerged with controlled fury, escorted. She didn't look our way, not once. Silence can be a promise and a threat. In the cab, the driver kept the radio high. Our names rode between ads and weather. He glanced up and recognized us slowly. Rough morning, he offered, hands steady. Buckle tight and breathe. We booked a room with the lobby full. I made sure the desk printed receipts twice. He requested a wake-up call on the hour. Repetition beats fatigue in bad weather. The clerk slid our keys with extra calm. Upstairs, I leaned against the door and listened. Distant elevators hummed like giant insects. I checked corners for motion dots and ports. Nothing blinked back at me tonight. He tossed the spare latch and sank to the carpet. Do we break after this? He asked finally. He stared at his hands and didn't blink. The question landed like a stone in water. I sat across from him and let it ripple. I owed both of us a truthful answer. You break patterns and you keep distance, I said. You do that whether I stay or not. If you want us, you earn new rituals. No locks, no oaths, no secret remotes. He nodded and gripped his own wrist hard. Then I learned different, he answered quietly. Or I walk alone and keep warning people. He looked up and met my eyes for once. I'm not tasting that tea ever again. The smallest laugh crawled out of my chest. We lay on the floor and counted ceiling tiles. Every breath stretched longer than the last. Outside, sirens traded places like impatient runners. My phone would stay dead for a while. I didn't miss it as much as I expected. The wake-up call rang and made us flinch. We were already awake and wired. I picked it up and thanked the machine. Then I looked at him and made the choice. You keep your word and I'll keep mine. We walked back to the lobby with our bags. A reporter waited at the door with a mic. Any final message for families like this? I looked straight into her camera and breathed. People aren't passwords, stop before someone stops you. The cab pulled up and we climbed in. The driver raised the volume again automatically. Our story ran on every screen I could see. Some faces believed and some scoffed. I didn't need unanimous to survive the week. We headed for the lawyer's office across town. He rested his head against the window and watched. I watched the rearview for shapes and patterns. Nothing followed except regular morning hunger. The day had teeth, but they weren't theirs. At the office door, he stopped and turned. Last chance to run alone, he offered. Last chance to run together, I countered. He smiled like a man choosing hard roads. We went inside and closed the world out. I still hear the porch chime in dreams. I still feel the bracelet light on my skin. But now I also hear applause at archives. And voices that refuse the script on cue. Fear teaches, refusal heals, I chose refusal.